Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 102. Tonight, our guest is Tony Kaye.
Hello.
Hello, is this Tony?
Yeah, speaking.
Hey, good evening. This is Sean from Soul Night
Hi,
Live.
hi, Sean. How's it going?
It's going pretty well.
That's good.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking time out of your evening for this late night chat. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, how have you been spending your days as of late?
Well, having moved from Los Angeles fairly recently, it's been sort of different and
Yeah.
hectic.
Whereabouts are you now?
We moved to Florida. We
Nice.
moved to the west coast of Florida. Yeah, we came to after I did the cruise to the edge, and that was in and out of Tampa, and I decided to have a look what Florida had to offer, and just fell in love with it here.
Well, that's great. That's great, you
Yeah,
know. And how many years were you in LA before that?
I moved to LA in 1974.
Wow, okay, that long ago. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and then almost immediately joined up with David Bowie, and it was 74, end of 74 into 75, and I think I joined Bowie in 76, maybe a little earlier. Yeah, so I've been there all this time
Well,
up
yeah,
until
you've really seen it go through a lot of changes over the years. I'm
yeah, a lot of changes, and was not too happy with what was going on there of late.
yeah, I'm
So
you, you
yeah, we decided to get the
yeah,
hell
you've
out.
kind of seen it go from its glory days to this kind of gentrified thing that it is now. I'm a member of a group on Facebook called Vintage Los Angeles, where they post pictures of all these amazing, legendary places around town that are basically
Oh, the
gone.
old days. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I've seen some of that. Kind of an interesting Hollywood history. Um, yeah, yeah. It's changed a lot. It was, when I moved there, there was nothing much there really, but it was a really creative place. Just musically, and of course the movie and TV business was there. So it was kind of an exciting place to, for me from London to move to.
now, am I right? The first time you came to America was when Yes came on the Yes album tour and
Yeah.
had the tour with Tull. Yeah, so that would have been like 71.
Tour with Alice Cooper, Toll, and someone else. I can't remember, some American band. But yeah, that was my first taste of America, and then of course I came back to New Orleans for the Badger album after I left Yes in '72. Lived in New Orleans for I don't know, 6 7 months. Went back to London and decided to move from there. And I loved LA, and I had a couple of friends there, so that was my first stop off.
Yeah, could you share a few memories of just that first Yes tour in 71? And what's the first thing you guys did when you got in America? Do you remember?
I don't remember too much about it, except I was in a little bit of a different space to the rest of the band,
Were you having
who
a little
who
more fun than they
were
were?
heavily influenced in a sort of New London hippie realm. And I was never that attracted to that fashion or ideology. and my favorite bands were American bands, and my favorite band was, of course, the Band.
Oh yeah, sure.
That sort of influenced my dress and sort of cowboy vibe and beard and jeans and cowboy boots, which was not exactly what John Anderson was into.
Well, it almost seems like, I mean, you were the first of many keyboardists, and it seems like, the keyboardist was always a part, yet a part of things, if that makes sense. I mean, Rick was, no
Well,
more.
he left a few times. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
and it
Yeah.
seemed like the kind of the four of them were kind of a unit, and then the keyboard player kind of floated in his own orbit a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, that's
Well, I totally understood it at the time. I was into, and you can tell sort of. I mean, Badger is somewhat in a progressive mode, but we were into a different kind of music, and I like the yes experimental approach, and I was a fan of um, the Nice and Pink Floyd and Gentle Giant, and I mean I liked everything that they did, but I think I was more into sort of more bluesy American music, particularly the Band. I was a huge Band fan. I
oh
love
yeah, oh that
their
music from
sort of
Big Pink.
American down home
You know,
approach.
Big Pink is like one of the most legendary records ever. It was groundbreaking and it
Yeah, really.
inspired so many people. I think it taught a lot of people to kind of peel back the pretense and just kind of be real. Yeah.
That's the influence that it kind of had on me. I thought the music that we were doing was somewhat pretentious, and of course the style, my style of Hammond, although I was very influenced in the early days by Graham Bond. I don't know whether you remember the Graham Bond
Oh yeah,
organization.
absolutely. With Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker and
Jack and Ginger, Dick Hexel Smith. Yeah, I mean, they were my influences, So, um, and of course, Graham was really the first person to make a Hammond sound a little grittier than the Jimmy Smith, Jimmy McGriff approach. And then, of course, Keith took that to the extreme.
oh,
Uh,
absolutely. I was a little curious about your evolution of Hammonds over the years. Like, do you remember just like the first time you had the pleasure of playing one and when it was?
yes, well, when Yes was first formed, I still had the Box Continental. I had no no more than that. I'd been playing before that, in Europe on piano, mostly on piano, and who could get hold of a Hammond B3 back then? It
Sure.
was sort of it
That
was sort of so yeah. When I joined, yes, it was the L100, I think, so the smaller Hammond,
yeah.
and then of course Mickey Tate, a roadie, built me a two-story Leslie cabinet that he built from scratch himself. Powered by Marshall amps and everything. That was the first time sort of went to souped up Hammond, and it wasn't really a yes thing, you know. Even though Keith was, and Keith was pushing it to the limit, but there was Procol Harum and the sort of softer Hammond approach. Um, but I was trying to take it to the limit too. So
Well, I think you just had one of the greatest Hammond sounds ever.
no, well, thank you.
Particularly time and a word. Just listen to something like The Prophet. It just has this edgy quality that cuts through the mix in a really great way. And I was kind of wondering, was it a different setup on the second album versus the first, or was it pretty much the same rig?
Yeah, it was pretty much the same, except I think on the on Time and a Word, I went to a regular Leslie. The what were they called? Those Leslie cabinets. I forget. But as opposed to the Mickey Tate self-built one,
Right, you had the
and
real
it had
thing.
it had an innate inbuilt distortion factor that I sort of exploited and just turned it up full, and that was it.
I love that. Yeah, so it was kind of, you could kind of dial in how much grit you wanted on it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I just took it to the extreme at that point.
Oh,
And then, of course, with the S album, that was a B3, so that gave it an extra, that extra sound, the B3 Hammond sound.
were you always kind of lusting after the B3, or was it kind of like you enjoyed every one of them along the way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the B3 sort of, that's what really American bands were playing, and even though Garth Hudson was playing something else, I don't even know what he was playing. Do you remember?
Offhand, I'm not sure.
It was a weird organ, and so he was getting all kinds of different sounds than most people, but most American bands and bluesy bands were using B3. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's just the sound of the early '70s, and a great one. I think it's timeless. It really just never goes out of style when you hear it. It just seems from the era, but not necessarily of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't think it wasn't really working for Yes at the time, which is one of the reasons. Although Rick certainly the roundabout solo was indicative of that kind of B3 Hammond
Yeah,
sound.
it was nice, but it never sounded as good as yours, in my opinion. Honestly, it's
But
almost
he mixed it with a lot of other things, and brought in the Mellotron and the Mini Moog that I personally hated. So,
well, the Mellotron. Everybody hated that once they had started
really,
using it,
I
of
was not
course.
the only one.
But that big Hammond sound is really the sound of the original Yes. That you hear echoes of it through the rest of the catalog, and it's always nice when you do, as far as I'm concerned, because I just feel like that's the sound of that first lineup was really, really special. I think sometimes it gets overlooked because of the more progressive eras that came later, but those first two records were just fantastic, and they had this.
Yeah, I think the combination of Peter and I was a good combination, but it was not what they wanted. The combination of sort of Peter doing his Pete Townsend and me doing my Keith Emerson.
Yeah, well, I think it added a lot of balls to the band that maybe weren't there later. So,
It did. It certainly changed later, but a lot of it to the good. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, great music came out of every era, as far as I'm concerned. I'm curious, have you had a chance to hear their new record?
Only the single, only the one track.
Yeah, the Ice Bridge.
Oh, the Ice Bridge.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the only thing. They won't send it to me.
Oh.
I pleaded. No, I haven't because they'll keep it under wraps. I think for a little while.
Yeah, I
Um,
would think so.
but I liked the Ice Bridge. I mean, I played with them 2 years ago and got to really be part of the family again.
Yeah, I saw that
And
and I loved it.
it was nice. They treated me. They're very very nice people. You know, Billy, of course, who I played with. In Circa.
Oh, sure, yeah, an old friend of yours at this point, you
Yeah,
know.
and of course Jay is an old friend of mine. I mean, I originally got Jay in Badfinger back in the 70s.
Oh, wow. It did, he
Yeah,
doesn't even look that old.
yeah, that's when I met Jay when he first arrived in LA from Albuquerque. He came to actually play with a solo artist that I was producing. We go back a long way, and it was great playing with him, and of course great play with Alan, and getting back with reacquainted with Steve, and they're such good guys, and they so appreciate each other,
Yeah, it seems like
which
they've
was not entirely possible in the past, but
yeah, it seems like this yes really gets on well, you know, and I think, you
they do.
know, a lot of
Yeah,
people pine for some sort of look at the past, get back with John Anderson, but I just say let it go, you know? I mean, John Anderson and Yes put out what, like 15 albums at least. I mean, if that isn't enough to satisfy people, I don't know what to tell them, you know?
yeah, I know, but yeah, some of these Yes fans, they really sort of live in a gone fantasy world. They would
Yeah, it
they would
just,
like
you
they would
know,
like to see
without
film.
without Chris in the fold too, I don't know. It just seems like that whole kind of era the book is closed, but there's no reason there can't be new chapters written by this lineup, and there have been. So
Well, you can tell how much they like each other just by watching them on stage, which I did every night. You know, because I only played at the end of the set, and you could tell that they were enjoying themselves, and they're really good too.
oh
I
yeah,
know that I know people like to put them down, but my goodness, I mean Jay is a monster.
oh yeah, he really gave him a good kick up the backside when he joined the fold. I think
Oh yeah,
and
definitely, and of
that's
course
and that's
Billy
not a
was.
patch on Alan. Alan's fantastic, but you know, it's Jay brought a lot to the table too.
Yeah, well, Alan was still recuperating at the 50th anniversary
Yeah,
tour.
like he had back surgery or something before that.
Yeah,
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 I thought so.
I was amazed that he could do what he did, and it was not easy for him. A lot of people, a lot of Yes fans don't realize the kind of pain that he was in and what it took. I mean, we played close to 45 minutes at the end for the encores, and he did it.
Yeah, yeah, and it was great to see him, be a part of it. I mean, if I had been him, I wouldn't have even had the energy to get on the road. So, my hat's off to him for,
Yeah, and
sticking
to
it
play some
out.
of those really complicated long Yes tracks, he wasn't up to it, and Jay was magnificent.
Well, it's funny. I had Alan on my show maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, along with Tony Levin and David Torn. They did that album, that
right.
instrumental album together. So it's been reissued on vinyl. So I had them on along with their producer Scott Shore, and we talked about it. And of course, we talked a bit about Yes as well. And I asked him about the new record. I'm like, any epics? And he's like, no, we're too old. And I thought, well, fair enough.
Yeah,
And
he's honest and pretty funny.
oh yeah, then he kind of let it slip about the ice bridge. So we've been kind of batting that title around for 6 months, almost thinking the album might be called that, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little did we know it was The Quest, which was an interesting title. I'm kind of curious to hear how it all ties in when it's
Yeah, really.
available and just exactly what this quest is. So, it seems like a bit of a concept. So, speaking of concept albums, I think we should talk
Speaking of concepts,
about your new concept album. um, so, this will be coming out on, let's see here. Oh, looks like
September 10th,
yeah, okay. That's correct. Yeah, September 10th. It's on,
the anniversary.
exactly. And this will be on what they call Spirit of Unicorn Music, which is distributed by our good friends at Cherry Red Records, who do so many amazing records with so many different amazing artists. So it's a great team for you to be part of, I think.
Well, yes, it is, and of course, Martin, who is his manager, kind of took me under his wing and encouraged me to finish with an album that was long in the making and never really was going to see the light of day in so many ways. It was more of a project for me, and he encouraged that, so I'm very happy to be with them.
Now, this is your first official solo record, am I right?
Yes, surprisingly enough.
So
Yeah.
I heard rumors that you had started one back in the 80s. Can you elaborate on that a bit? And what it was like?
It was a thing that Lee Abrams, who you probably know from the Yes family,
Yes.
put together, and I forget the name of the record company or the proposed record company, and I did actually go into the studio, but it just wasn't right. I didn't know. I had no concept of what I wanted to do, and it just kind of fizzled out, and the record company fizzled out. So yeah.
And what year would you say that was when it all fizzled?
Well, it was around about 89, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I never revisited any of the material or anything. It was, I never really knew what to do. I didn't really. I was a fan of Vangelis. I must admit.
yeah.
He influenced me, and there were a couple of people that were doing sort of keyboard instrumental work, but I don't know, at the time it didn't really grab me. It didn't really interest me. I was sort of under the impression that it kind of had to have vocals, and well, I'm not a vocalist, so for me to write for vocals, and I mean, I'm a fan of Rick's, but I don't know. It never really grabbed me, that instrumental approach to. I mean, they were very good. He's excellent player.
Oh yeah, fantastic. I mean, and he's put out like over 100 albums now, and I don't know. With the instrumental keyboard thing, I'd say a little goes a long way. Just my 2 cents. Love you, Rick, but
yeah. And I think it does work. I mean, I'm much more of a fan of the Vangelis approach, which is a sort of not classical approach, a sort of more modern approach to doing it. And I really didn't want to do that classical thing. I mean, on this album, I do visit it occasionally, and there are several, I wouldn't say classical, but but orchestral pieces on it. One long piece and a couple of shorter pieces. But I was not, and I think at the time I was more into, sort of playing blues piano. So,
Sure.
yeah, it was something that I couldn't really see in the context of a solo album. It was not that, And I did try sort of Pink Floyd, Vangelis approach to things, but I was never really satisfied. So I didn't do it. I didn't come up with a solo album.
Well, fair enough. I mean, if you're not feeling it, then don't force it, that's the good way to go about it, I suppose. So, but that brings us to this record, which is fresh off the presses, so to speak, or will be very soon.
Have you heard?
Yeah, I got an advance copy, and I had the chance
Oh, you
to
did?
put on the
Uh-huh.
headphones and really soak it all in. And I thought it was really compelling. And, it did kind of paint these pictures in my mind that remind me a bit of that day, the day that everything changed
Yeah.
for
Well,
everybody.
that's what it's supposed to do, and that was my the quest was to take what happened that day and create music.
Can you tell us a bit about the process? I read in the press release that basically after 9/11, the next day you had the urge to break out your keyboards for the first time in a long time and just started playing. Was that just for kind of a therapeutic reasons at that point, would you say?
I don't quite know how it happened. I had left the band after the Talk tour, which I guess was around '96,
Yeah.
and didn't really, Chris at the time wanted me to sort of manage the band with him, and we hung out together, and then he went off in a different direction, and I thought that it was probably a good idea to sort of semi-retire. I wanted to play tennis anyway, so and then I was at home. All my keyboards were in cases in the garage, and then 9/11 happened, and it really kind of woke something up inside of me, and I knew that I had to make some music to represent what had happened that day. It was quite
And that,
obvious.
yeah. And that became something that you just kind of sporadically worked out over the next 10 years or so. I feel like I've heard some early versions of a few of these pieces that have been shared around YouTube. Did you
Well,
kind of start to
yes,
record
I
it
mean,
and then?
I did write quite a lot of what it is now, but I always had this idea that it had to be music to visuals
Hmm.
of that day, and um, and of course, there was no way of doing that. There was until iMovie came out, um, and suddenly, we had people like me had the tools to actually edit uh, video. So I was able to learn the editing process and put the music to visuals, and that's eventually what I put out on YouTube, which is
Ah, okay.
what you heard or saw.
Yeah, and that dated back a ways, right? It's not from the most recent recordings.
Oh no,
Yeah,
no,
way back.
not at all. I mean, it's changed a lot. I think it was about 40 minutes of music then,
Hmm.
and people liked it, and a lot of people encouraged me to keep going, um, and kind of finish it. Um, but a lot of things were going on. Circa was happening at that time, and we were, Billy's a little bit of a taskmaster when,
Sure.
when it comes to recording music, and we I I think we put out 5 albums in that time,
You had quite a few
and
of them,
and
yeah. And
yeah, and we toured.
it's
We
a,
did
you
some.
did, you did that big medley. That was really,
Right, with yes, when Alan White was in the band right at the beginning.
yeah, that was a
Um,
really, really neat thing to do. You
yeah, it
know,
was. I'm glad we did that.
so
That was actually fun.
yeah, some of my favorite parts are hearing you play the stuff from the first two records. In that, it was
Oh yeah, yeah,
great
right.
hearing you
Yeah.
play some of those
Well, it was
songs
a whole
again.
history of the albums,
Yeah, the chronological journey.
the
Yeah,
chronological journey.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
I,
it was fun, and Emerson was there that night, and
oh, really? Neat.
yeah, yeah. It was fun. I mean, we only ever played it once.
But yeah,
And we
is that a festival of some sort? I can't remember which one. Some
No,
prog festival.
it was a gig in Southern California.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah, so San Luis Obispo, I think.
okay. Yeah, and John was living there anyway, I believe. So,
Oh, right, that's where John. That's where John. No, it wasn't that. It was that gig. It's a fairly prominent a club just north of San Diego.
okay.
Um, I forget the name of it. But that's where it was recorded, and we filmed it too. So yeah, that was fun. So there was a lot of things that were sort of getting in the way of me finishing this. It wasn't really, a deadline to a record company or anything. Um, and fast forward to almost 2 years ago when COVID happened. I moved, set up studio in new house, and didn't go out.
I know the feeling. I wrote an album myself, so I
Oh,
think
you did,
many
right?
of us
Yeah.
did.
So
Yeah, it was almost a discipline thing where it's like you can't just lay around in bed all day. You got to get up and do something, and that was kind of
yes, it
my.
was very inspirational to finish something. I'm not sure if I had to start something that how it would have gone, but to actually know that I had another 30 minutes of music to write and record. It was pretty inspirational.
Sure, and tell me a bit about the cover art. It's a little different for Roger Dean. Obviously, it needed to be. Floating rocks and bonsai trees just
Yeah.
wouldn't have worked this time, among other things.
Well, I wanted it to be dramatic. I wanted it to really sort of tell a story in a very immediate, dramatic way, and I knew Roger would, put his twist on it. I was really into trying to persuade him to do it, but I met him on Bruce Theatre, not seeing him in many, many years. And he, of course, had the badger. He had the first Badger album.
Yeah, that's one of
Artwork
his best pictures. It's beautiful.
Yeah, he had the original painting of it, and so we got to talk on that. Sort of got reacquainted, and it sort of it was not difficult for me to say, can you listen to this and paint something? So it was the first thing that he painted, and it's quite dark and very dramatic.
I think it's appropriate, very much. I think it's a serious subject, and the artwork is rather serious as well. Absolutely.
Right, and Michael, who has worked with Yes and various people around Cherry Red, Michael Innes.
Yeah.
Innes. Yeah.
I know the name.
Yeah, he got on board and took the ball from Roger and created a great booklet from the titles of the song, and wrote stories and little vignettes and designed a booklet around Roger's painting, and wrote little stories for every track, 16 tracks. And it works really well because you can actually, as you're listening to the music, read what he has written about his interpretation. It's very, very nice.
Okay, well, that's a great bonus that folks probably aren't even aware of. So when they get a copy, they're gonna have
Not yet, no.
Yeah.
But it's very it's very appropriate for the for the tone of what happened.
Yeah. Now, am I right that you had a particular collaborator that you did most of this album with? Or
No, I did it all myself. I played saxophone and orchestras, but I have a few friends who played on it. Not the least being my wife, who wrote the song "Sweetest Dreams," which is in the middle of the album.
Yeah, that's a really nice one.
Yeah, it sort of portrays what the first responders were going through, after that day. And so she was there to encourage me all the way through, really. She's a very, very good musician, singer, songwriter, guitar player. And for from 2001 till 2006 or 7, she had her own band, and very involved in. We were both very involved in her music. So she was very much an inspiration. And I have a couple of friends who played on it. There's a track that relates to the in the airplane, and it's called Flight 11.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a drum solo on the beginning, and the drums are pretty prominent on that track. That's Jay. I asked Jay to do a drum solo.
Oh, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize that was him. That's
Yep.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. And a guitar player friend, he put some very strange guitar on a track called 285 Fulton Street, which was supposed to be sort of a street busking band in New York City, during the day before it all happened. and it's supposed to be an interpretation of that, and actually is an inspiration. You probably wouldn't think about it, but I got the inspiration from the first band that I ever saw in my hometown in Leicester, which was the Graham Bond organization.
Okay, awesome. So it all ties back.
Yeah, it really tied back to that, and it's a jam, really. Sax and very sort of Jack Bruce bass, which I played on keyboards, of course, and wild guitar and sort of wild jazzy, Jimmy McGriff type Hammond on it. You may remember it. I don't know how carefully how many times you've listened to it.
I've had the chance to sit down and listen to it a couple times, and it all kind of washed over me. So it kind of like once it gets rolling, it kind of blends from one to the next. So,
well,
but I know the bit you're talking about.
Yes, I mean, I wrote it as one to listen to as one piece.
Yeah, I think it flows really nicely.
Yeah, it's not something that you can just sort of isolate a track and go, there's a track. You really have to. I mean, it's an hour, 10 minutes long, but you really have to listen to it as one continuous piece of music.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to take it in. So just
I think so. Yeah.
Put on the headphones and sit back in a comfy chair and take it in.
Or turn it up loud.
Or crank it up in the car. That's another great place. To listen. That's one of my favorite places to listen to music is in the car. It's like
right. Yeah. Me too.
It kind of really surrounds you nicely. Now, am I right that everything that's on this album, some of it's been written, in the past 20 years, but did you is any of what we're hearing stuff that you recorded from 10 years ago, or did you kind of start fresh when it came time to record this version?
Well, actually, there are three sort of major orchestral pieces that were the first things that I wrote, and they stayed. There are 4 tracks, including the beginning, and I really wanted this sort of start of the day, and I had this storm going because that's what was happening off the coast of the East Coast. There was a hurricane that was happening. So I wanted this very sort of childlike, plaintive, and I came up with Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star that my wife sang, and a jazzy thing that really indicates the beginning of the day.
Yeah, it kind of starts with a positive note, almost an innocence, because nobody had any idea what was about to unfold.
Well, exactly, yes. And then it goes into the 9/11 Overture, which was the very first thing that I wrote the day after it happened.
Okay.
And I kept it the way that I recorded it, which was on an 8-track cassette recorder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what are the bulk of the keyboards that you used on this? Was it mostly modern boards from the last 10 years, or did you have some that you've had since the 90s that you've been using?
So, I didn't really use what I had on the road with Yes. I had some practice keyboards, which were fairly inexpensive Korgs.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the original keyboards that I started writing on.
Okay.
Until I got the Roland. The rest of most of the album is Roland.
Okay.
And yeah, it's all Phantom X7.
Okay, that's good to know for the keyboard techs out there that are curious about sounds and textures.
And the all the Hammond on the album is the Roland VK8.
Okay. Now,
which I used mostly on all the Circa stuff too.
Yeah.
And that goes through a ventilator Leslie unit that is cranked up to max distortion.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you're kind of known for that when you play the organ.
Right.
Well, I love it.
And actually, I mean, it's not a B3, but you crank it up and you get the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think of, like, I noticed you were using kind of a modern Hammond when you were playing with Yes on the 50th anniversary tour. What do you think of those versus, the vintage stuff?
Well, I mean, I've tried them all, and I've tried all the new versions, the Nords and the this and that.
Yeah.
I'm just a big fan of Roland, and I love the VK. It's just that you with Circa, I used it with a Leslie, with a real Leslie, and which you can't use it on its own. It just you've got to put it through a Leslie.
Yeah. Well,
and
like the Leslie just adds magic to whatever you play it through. You could play a Casio through a Leslie, and suddenly it would start sounding really nice.
It has that rotor sound that is only Leslie. But eventually, I got tired of taking that around, and happily, the ventilator came out, and they did a really job in simulating the Leslie. You could have it on different speeds, different effects. It just made it so much easier. It's a tiny little, foot pedal.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know because I was kind of curious what your take was on the modern organ sound. When was the last time you played a B3?
I think probably with good point.
Was there ever one in the studio on any of the 80s and 90s Yes albums?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Yes album was B3.
Yeah. What about like 90125, like that solo on Hearts? That's obviously you on the Hammond.
Yeah, that's B3. I used B3 all the way to the end of. I had B3 live on the Union tour. I had B3 live on the Talk tour.
Okay.
That was, I think, the last time that I used it, except for sessions with when I was doing sessions with Billy. We always used the B3, and then it just got too much to carry around.
Oh, I'm sure.
I got too old to keep picking.
Oh, I can identify with you. It's like the older you get, the less you want to drag around. For me, you go from having a Marshall half stack to an amp with one 12-inch speaker in one hand and a guitar in the other.
Exactly.
Where I just want to walk in.
I do remember doing some Circa gigs where they provided the supposed backline amplifiers and everything, and they supplied the organ, and a Leslie, and it was completely disastrous.
Is it almost like when you haven't been on one in years, it's kind of hard to just hop in there off the cuff and make it
No,
sing?
they were all beat up and
Oh, they just
old
weren't good
and hardly
equipment.
worked.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so yeah, getting people to provide them was not an option.
Right. Well, it's almost like you shouldn't have. Really, you
Right.
shouldn't have. Right, if you can't bring the best, then don't bother.
Right.
Yeah. So I had a few fan questions that people sent me. I was wondering if we could talk about a few of those, if you got the time.
Sure.
Okay. And some of these are a little
If I
far.
can.
Some of these are a little far-fetched, so they might make you laugh. I'll start with one of those. Isn't Tony supposed to be an uncredited keyboard player on a best-selling Def Leppard album?
Yes.
Really? Tell us more.
I was working with I bumped into Mutt Langer when we were recording 9125, and he was in a studio, in London, creating Pyromania, and he had this brilliant idea of putting analog synth and syncing them up to the guitars.
Okay.
So he multi-tracked. They were not the finished thing. He had multi-tracked maybe 2 or 3 guitars. There were much more if you listen to the album. Those crashing guitars were. But he had me play exactly the same thing as what the guitars were playing. So actually, you don't really know that there's a keyboard there. It's not like it's a keyboard part on the album. There's no keyboard. But there are multi-tracked Oberheims and Rolands and mostly the Oberheims, the OB8s and the OBX8s. That I was actually, playing on the S album, and he wanted that big fat analog sound, and I spend hours, trying to figure out what the guitars were playing. It was all big chord stuff, but and then we multi-tracked.
Yeah, if I don't know better, I'd say he did the same thing with the bass. Like there's like synth bass kind of doubling what the regular bass was playing as well. It's almost like everything got doubled up by keyboards.
I think so. Yes, I think he was obsessed with putting analog synth with acoustic guitars.
Yeah, well, it worked, and I got to say that I think that's really their best record. I think that was kind of
fantastic. Yeah, he did.
I think
he did a great job.
It's just one of the.
Yeah, he was the mastermind. Behind it. I mean, the guy's a genius.
Yeah, when I was a teenager, that was the first cassette we popped in the tape player Friday night when we're heading out to have a night on the town. That was kind of our soundtrack.
Right. Well, that's the story of. I don't think I've told that story ever before. I don't think anyone's asked me about it. So there you go.
Kudos to whoever sent that in. Yeah, they did their homework, didn't they? Let's see. I have another little more in-depth question. We'd be interested in memories of recording Big Generator at Lake Como in Italy, where they recorded in a castle studio that's so cold that everyone rented villas elsewhere and ended up. You were the only one that stayed in the castle there with Trevor Horn.
Yeah, me and Trevor Horn.
Yeah, and I hear you guys really didn't get on. So
my buddy. buddy. Yeah, he was, and we were in tiny little rooms in this castle. It was a little bizarre. It really wasn't totally set up for living in, which is why the rest of the band rented expensive villas in the neighborhood, which is why it cost so much money to record.
Yeah, that sounds like a rock and roll excess story if I ever heard one. But it was the '80s.
Yes, it was, and I sort of put my foot down. Unfortunately, in the end, I didn't get a financial break from it, so it was actually pointless, and I should have taken the beautiful villa and the expensive European cars.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, am I right that basically that album got re-recorded again after Trevor Horn exited the picture?
No, I wouldn't say it. No, it wasn't, and actually one of the great things that came out of the castle were the drum tracks, because they were recorded in amazing acoustic rooms around the castle.
Yeah, I really think that's the best drum sound on any of the Rabin era Yes albums.
Yeah, potentially. And I don't want to put it down. I mean, I don't think that it turned out in the final mix of the album as good as some of the early mixes. And it is true. The drum sounds, especially on those early mixes, were sensational. I think they were maybe squeezed a little bit,
compressed too much. Yeah.
At the end, yeah.
I think my favorite version of that album is the one I have on vinyl, like an original pressing from the '80s. I've never heard it sound particularly good on CD. It always sounds a little tinny.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I agree. I agree with that. Not that I've heard the vinyl thing, but I do remember early mixes, and I thought it was a much better album.
Yeah. Now, in hindsight, I I think that's my favorite of the Rabin era albums. There's just something.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear because there's kind of the ambition that Yes is expected to have, and all updated for the '80s. Whereas 90125, was written without being a Yes album. It was more after the fact it became one. So like Big Generator was like the first album where y'all said, okay, we have to make a Yes album this time, a new Yes album. That's was a different mindset for that lineup, I would think.
That's partly true, although it was conceived, written in Los Angeles, where the band was very dissipated, and it was actually conceived and recorded, really, I would say, pretty much top to bottom at Trevor's studio as a demo.
Okay, before you went to the castle and all that.
Yeah, so it was pretty set before we went into rehearsals before the castle, but very much a Rabin. Although, I had a few things on Big Generator that came from our original rehearsal, which was in a house in Hollywood.
Yeah, what are a few things?
Shoot high and low.
Yeah, I was kind of curious if you could elaborate a bit on your particular contributions to that album, writing wise.
Well, I don't remember exactly. Rhythm of Love was one of my. Not that I'm very proud of Rhythm of Love, even though they keep on playing it.
It's a fun song, but I mean, there's other songs on that album that I think are more yes-ish, if that makes sense.
Not the greatest in my opinion, but it came out of a demo that that I had started, much like Shoot High, Aim Low, which was actually something that Alan and I started together. He on a drum machine, and me on, I don't know, piano, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's one of my favorite tracks, Shoot High, Aim Low. And there's a couple others on there that I think are, I think they kind of point to the more epic scope that Yes is known for, which there wasn't a whole lot of that on 90125. So it's like these songs
Right,
seem more
yeah.
like more grandiose and all the better for it.
I think it's a little underrated. I don't think it was a perfect mix or even a perfect album. There was some with a couple of weird choices of songs on it.
Yeah, speaking of that, I want to ask about I'm Running, because that seems like it's almost like it reminds me of the song Tequila for a little bit, that kind of south of the border thing.
I like that song.
Oh, I love it. I love it. But I think it gets overlooked a lot of times when people think about Yes epics, but that's kind of the big epic moment. And I noticed you guys played it live a few times and then
Yeah.
dropped it pretty quickly. But I've seen some pretty hot versions of it. And why do you think it was drops from the tour? Was it just too much trouble to play it, or didn't get enough good response, or what?
Probably. It was. Yeah, I think it was difficult to play.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's a pretty
Probably.
busy number, but the versions I've seen are fantastic, and like there's a few early shows where you guys basically played the whole record in one evening.
Oh, we did, yeah, most of the time. And in fact, we sort of ended up in South America, and I mean, really, the only, the only version that I have heard that I see that it's still on YouTube was a live show from Chile
Oh yeah, for the Talk tour, right?
for the Talk Tour.
Yeah, that's pretty well filmed, That's probably the
Yeah,
only pro
I did.
shot thing out there. Wish there was some way it could come out as a real, DVD that's legit. But yeah, we've
I'm
all got our
thinking
copies.
no, I was thinking that we actually played it on that tour, but it wasn't. It was the Big Generator tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm Running was a riff that Chris had been batting around since the late 70s that just finally found a home. I remember hearing stories about him playing, and Trevor's like, all right, I'll write something. Let's quit
Something.
playing that. Let's I'll use it. I give in.
Yeah.
So okay, I got to ask about a couple other ones here. Could you elaborate a bit on the Talk album and how involved you were with that one versus Big Generator? Uh,
Well, everyone had pretty much dissipated at that time. John was off. He had sort of co-written with Trevor for a period, starting that album, and everyone, I think, had pretty much gone different directions. Alan came in, and we did a session in a studio to put the drums down, and then he left, and Chris left, and really it was just Trevor and I at Trevor's studio for the whole album. And it was interesting because it was recorded on Digital Performer, which was a whole new recording on a computer.
yeah, I heard it. I vaguely remember a story of like him needing to like daisy chain a bunch of them together to have enough tracks
Right.
and brain power, and like this was all kept in a little air conditioned shed.
Yeah, exactly. It was really an experimental thing, and Trevor was a genius at how he, managed to control this new technology with such a big project, in his garage.
Yeah, and I mean, the end results I think speak for themselves because it's a really great sounding record, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some great writing on it. And then it's like the first time that him and John really hit it off and wrote some things together. So there's a different dynamic going on that record compared to the previous ones.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Trevor really made an effort with John to go. They went away, to some cabin and you know and wrote for 2 months or whatever it was, and made a real effort to sort of corral John into being more specific.
Which isn't easy, I'm sure. So I've heard that Trevor's tried to pin him down before, and sometimes he didn't like to be pinned down. So it was
John's not that easy to corral. So he did a great job. It was Trevor's baby, and he did a fantastic job considering that it was a completely new technology.
Yeah.
We had no idea. Really,
what do you say to people that try to dismiss this record as just a Trevor Rabin solo album with Yes playing on it?
I think that's unfair.
Because it's more of a group thing than people want to maybe realize.
It was not the the band is the best when it is playing together, recording together in a studio. Going through that thing with which they did in the 2000s, and certainly Big Generator and 90125 and Drama and quite probably not Union. Union was very sort of dissipated. Well, there were two sides to two bands to that.
Anyway. That album has a bad rep, but at the time, as a Yes fan before the internet, none of us really knew the story behind it.
Story, right,
and it was more enjoyable before I knew the details.
Yes, you don't want to know.
How they made the sausage, so to speak.
Exactly.
And although I like some of those songs, I mean, there's some good Yes music on that record, I think.
Yeah, there is underrated in a lot of ways, but a lot of it the band wasn't really playing on it, and
there's all those.
Talk was like that, but I think it's to say that it was Trevor's solo album. He wrote it with John.
Yeah, so that kind of shoots a hole in that idea right there.
Right.
But yeah, the things you hear on the internet, seems like everybody's got an opinion about every Yes album.
I had to stop reading that stuff.
Oh, I don't blame you. I mean,
because mostly it's wrong, uneducated, completely made up. Exaggerated.
Well, I once I got online in the late '90s, I realized that there's a lot of factions in the Yes camp, and it's almost like you gotta pick your lineup and fight to the death over them, and I think that's ridiculous. But
it became. I remember it became folklore that I actually didn't play on live 90125. I actually was standing up there miming, and my keyboard tech underneath the stage was doing everything. I mean, and people believed it, and kept bringing it up.
And the real truth is, of course, you were playing the entire night, obviously,
Yeah,
and he was kind of throwing some extra icing on the cake from under the stage. That
he was playing a vocoder for the vocals.
so it was very limited. Yeah. Well, I mean, just watching 9012 live, it's quite obvious that you're rocking it out there. It's all real. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's stupid, and I really wanted to tell these idiots, just watch 9012 live, watch Union, watch Big Generator. I mean, it, but they perpetuated this myth that was so ridiculous, so untrue.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just to be taken with a grain of salt because, these people are uninformed. And I should point out that in the nature of fandom on the internet, it seems like there's a very vocal minority that speaks louder than anybody else. Meanwhile, 90% of the people love Yes, never said a bad thing about them.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes changed their lives for the better in many, many ways. So I just want to kind of give a shout out to that 90% and kind of
I know it's always the uninformed minority. It can be three people,
right.
and and suddenly it becomes the truth.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I'll say a lie enough and it becomes the truth, but it really doesn't. I mean, when we know the truth. We know what's going on.
All
So,
this, the speculation about John and the speculation about Chris, Steve. I mean, it's
well, that's one of the reasons I enjoy doing these shows is where I can just cut through the smoke and ask you guys directly, what really happened rather than sitting around speculating about the band, but I'd rather just ask you.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I had some questions. Oh, here's an interesting one. There is a gentleman named Dave Kerman who is a drummer with a group called Present. They're kind of one of these rock and opposition groups, kind of like Magma, that sort of school of rather avant-garde progressive music. And he insists he followed Yes on several dates on their 1977 tour and that you were part of the entourage in some capacity despite not being a member. And my friend that sent the question says he expressed a lot of doubt to Dave about that, but he insists you were there. Any truth to that? 1977.
Well, I was either unconscious or extremely inebriated or stoned. But I actually don't remember that. Where was this supposed to take place?
I don't know, just kind of on the Going for the One tour, I would guess. Like you were.
And I was
part of the entourage.
Following them around?
Or just kind of hanging out with old friends, I guess.
What year would this be? Maybe I was inebriated.
1977?
1977. 1977, I was playing with Detective. And Badfinger. What were they called?
Which one?
What were they called? What was the band called?
Which band?
The band that I was supposed to be in the entourage.
Oh, yes. Like you were hanging out with Yes while they were on tour for their 1977 tour.
Oh, I thought you meant another band.
No. I'm talking about Yes.
No.
Definitely not.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
When I first, the only time that I hung out with them, per se, was in 75.
Okay, would that be when Pat Mraz was there?
I'm pretty sure Rick was in the band. And I flew with them to Vegas. What tour would that be? Would that be Tales?
It'd have to be, because after that, Rick would have been gone. Yeah.
Yeah. It was Tales. Yeah, because I was having been away from the band for some time. I remember it being a little bit strange hanging out with them and actually watching Tales on stage was somewhat strange.
Did it seem like they had gotten a little too big for their britches musically at that point?
No, I understood what they were doing, and they were very they were very into playing it. It was just fairly strange music, and it just went on forever, and it was quite avant-garde.
Yes, I think that's a fair way of putting it. You know what always struck me as kind of funny is, Bill Bruford left for King Crimson because Yes was a little too predictable. He said he had to pull the same rabbit out of the same hat every night live. And of course, wants to do something fresh every time he plays, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
So he left for King Crimson, and then Yes goes off the deep end into this rather avant territory that isn't, it's not like King Crimson, but it's almost like, well, maybe Bill should have stuck around because they were about to get kind of adventurous anyway.
Yes, right. Yeah, sort of strange timing, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Bill had the opportunity to join Crimson, so he took it.
Oh yeah,
and it was the best thing for him.
Yeah,
but yes, it was quite it was quite avant-garde, and the one thing that actually struck me at the time was that 100% of the audience were male.
Not surprising. And I'm sure a lot of them, I mean, watching Tales, I believe some of those shows were played before the album even came out. Or, even if it was new, it takes a while to absorb an album like that.
Heard the album. It was sort of surprising for me.
Yeah.
And I think there were some excesses going on anyway. Certainly in the psychedelic way that it was presented on stage. Eddie was the sound guy that I remember, and it was deafening.
Oh wow!
I mean, Eddie's Eddie, and you love Eddie, but I think at that time he was, he had his finger on the volume control pretty heavy.
Do you think
I remember it being absolutely deafening.
Like everybody's hair is blown back like the guy in the Maxell ad,
Yeah, it's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
But it was great, and I think if you were a little bit stoned, it was probably
even better.
Probably great.
Yeah, I can't help but think that a lot of the 70s fusion acts like Mahavishnu and Return to Forever kind of inspired groups like Yes also to go into this more avant territory.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
that's very mid-70s.
I think John was definitely, and Chris were definitely listening to those two bands.
Sure. So I wanted to ask you how you came to join Yes, and at the time, was it just John and Chris, or was?
No, it was obviously Chris had been in the scene with Peter, so it was Peter, and they were all up at the Shaz Club on Water Street, next to the Marquee Club,
right?
And and I just wandered up there one day. It was a little private club, and it was just really musicians up there, tiny little bar upstairs, and that's where I met the three of them.
Okay,
Before Bill.
yeah, then Bill answered an ad. Did you have another drummer before Bill, or?
Yeah, there was another drummer. I think the Sin drummer. I don't actually remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically it was the three of them, and of course Keith was up there. And we ended up being sort of sponsored or helped financially by the manager of the Marquee Club, and we did I think a residency Tuesday night, and the Nice had a residency Wednesday night. So it all started there.
So much amazing music in that, just that compressed in that time and just area of London, you know. I mean, what are some other groups you remember seeing right around then that were your contemporaries?
I think Gentle Giant, Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd played the Roundhouse. They weren't really. I don't think they were marquee. Oh my goodness! I don't remember. The Stones, of course.
Yep.
The Stones played the Marquee Club. I had been in a band playing the I think it was the Roundhouse. I think it was called the Roundhouse, where Pink Floyd played. But yes, I mean it was true. It was somewhat of a hotbed.
Yeah, it just
seems it was Tin Pan Alley. You know, it was Water Street.
Yeah. Well, that's just just for an American like me, even trying to imagine what it was like, it's just kind of seems like a magical time.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that was the sort of epicenter of it. Of course, there was a pub just up the street from the Marquee Club called the Ship, and I have no idea how I remember all this.
Well, I'm enjoying the memories.
It was a long time ago.
Now, am I right? Oh, go ahead.
No, and the Ship was where it was a big music hangout. Everyone hung out there.
Do you remember a diner that people would eat at on the M1 coming back from gigs up north?
Sure.
I was talking about that with Derek Shulman recently. I think he's going to do a documentary about it. I was wondering if you could. Do you remember the name of it?
Blue something.
Yeah, I think I remember him saying that. I can't remember the title, but yeah. Any memories of being there?
Many. Yeah, it was a brightly lit diner on the M1, which for practically any gig that you came from the north, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Leicester, you got on the M1 to get to London, and it was sort of the Blue Boar.
The Blue Boar, that's it. Yes.
The Blue Boar, and also the cafe that we sort of started at, which was close to where we first started rehearsing. Where I first started rehearsing was the Gioconda. I remember that.
Yeah, it just seemed like a really interesting story how, all these bands after their gigs would kind of bump into each other at the Blue Boar.
Yeah, it was. Sometimes it was a meeting place for bands on their way down.
Yeah, like Gentle Giant and The Move were a couple that Derek mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure Derek's got a lot of stories about that. He's got a pretty keen memory of of those days.
Oh yeah, well, it's always a treat to get to chat with him because yeah, he's
Hmm.
got a lot of great stories. Now, am I right that Yes lived in kind of a band house early on?
We did, yes. Drayton Gardens.
Do you think it's still there?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Somebody's living
Everything
in it.
stays in London. Chris lived in the basement. Uh, John and I lived in the top flat, and a band called Sleepy lived in the middle flat.
Okay, and
Sleepy was consisting of guys, a couple of guys from the Warriors that were John's original band.
right.
And of course, Ian Wallace, who, became sort of famous playing with all kinds of people.
Yeah, King Crimson among others.
Crimson, yes.
Like before Bill arrived, I think he was the drummer right before that.
Right before that, yeah. A great drummer, actually.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
And in fact, I think we wanted Ian to be the drummer in the band, but he refused, I think, for some reason.
Interesting. Do you remember the first time Bill came and played with y'all?
Bill?
Yeah.
The first gig, no.
We've heard about that famous one, the Rachel McMillan College Deptford, where you all played the midnight hour for like a half an hour.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
I do remember. I do remember doing a gig up at the university that Bill was studying at in Leeds University.
Yeah.
And I remember we dragged him into the dressing room and sort of persuaded him forcibly to leave Leeds University, if you believe it, and join the band.
And he took you up on it.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And the rest, as they say, is history, I guess. Now, I take it he did not live in the band house with the rest of you.
No, he was a Londoner, as Chris was. Peter was a Londoner too. Yeah. Now, and John and I were not, and we we lived together. It was pretty messy.
Yeah, I heard. I've read a few Yes books where they kind of discuss it, and a bunch of young guys in their 20s. I mean, it's gonna be messy. It's true to this day.
Guys in their 20s. Oh my God.
It's not exactly about being tidy. That's kind of the last thing on your mind.
No, I remember. I remember guys climbing up the outside of the house and they're trying to get into where Sleepy lived. and a beautiful, gracious old ex actress, I think she was, landlady, who lived there also, who was kind of kind of keeps trying to keep us in order.
Yeah, kind of the house mom in a way.
Yeah. Because no one had any money to pay her, and people were climbing up and trying to get through windows to sleep on the floor. And, it was messy.
Do you know the picture that's on the cover of the first Yes album where you're all standing in? Where was that taken?
That was where I lived.
Really? Tell me more.
Yeah, it was called Lots Road, and I lived in there. In fact, there was a band called Family.
Sure, I remember them.
Yeah, they lived next door, and I lived in the place where that photograph was in the back, and upstairs was a blues guy called Victor Brox.
Hmm.
Don't ask me how I remember him, but I have no idea. And he was sort of being my mentor because I really wanted to learn how to play blues piano.
Mm-hmm.
And he played with all the best, blues bands around, and got me to see the Stones and John Mayall and Georgie Fame and all those guys, but yeah, think about it.
That's great. I was wondering because it's such an iconic picture of y'all standing in front of the building with the columns.
Why it was photographed there, I have no idea.
It almost looks like a sculpture garden with all the sculptures in the yard and such. Yeah. And
it was opposite. Our view was the Battersea Power Station.
The which?
Battersea Power Station.
Oh, like on the cover of Animals from Pink Floyd.
The famous Pink Floyd.
Which is now gentrified, and you can live there for $2,000 a month.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's true. They've turned it into like a multiplex, yuppified apartment building. They built a bunch of little skyscrapers around it with expensive housing. Yeah, it's...
Yeah, I must admit, I was, the last time I was in London, I was surprised at the change.
Yeah, they do that a lot here in the States too, where they'll take some old warehouse district and turn it into a bunch of breweries and fancy fashion shops and restaurants.
Yeah.
It's kind of a typical thing. Although for some cities like Atlanta, it definitely gives a lot of these areas a new lease on life, rather than just decaying.
Sure.
So.
Yes, I mean, in England, places like Manchester and Leeds and Liverpool, which were really broken down cities, all got a new lease of life down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happens. So it's like kind of recycling in a funny way.
Yeah, I certainly didn't recognize it because I just remembered it. I never really went back there, only for a couple of days or a gig.
Do you think the house you lived in that's on the cover of the first album is still there?
Yeah.
You think so?
I'm pretty sure.
I wonder if I could find it on. They have this Google Street View where you can just troll around the streets of any city and look at pictures. What street did?
Check it out. Lots Road.
Lots Road. L-O-T-Z.
L-O-T-T maybe, or L-O-T-S.
Lots Road. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can dig that up. I think the Yes fans would get a kick out of seeing the place all these years later if it's still there. Well, just a few more questions and we'll wrap it up. I'm thoroughly enjoyed our chat this evening. I just kind of.
Well, you could probably keep me for a couple of hours, but it's getting. Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Atlanta.
Oh, in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're on the same time.
Yeah, we're all both on Eastern. I'm kind of a night owl anyway. So,
I'm just hanging in the studio. So.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm just kind of relaxing after a long day at work. I just got a new recent job. I'm the manager of a music store here in Atlanta.
Oh wow! Really?
Yeah, and it's been a lot.
A music store that continues to be open.
Yeah, we actually, you were using the safe protocols, as safe as you can be, but yeah, and it's been interesting. I've done a lot of different things over the years, and in a way, this is kind of lets me bring it all together, kind of like retail meets music,
So you're selling, what is it, like Guitar Center? You're selling everything?
It's like a small subsidiary of Guitar Center where it's more of a neighborhood kind of strip mall music store.
Oh, a small, not a Guitar Center type.
Yeah, not like grocery store sized or Kmart sized, but just your typical, more kind of shoebox kind of layout.
Well, it's great that
But
it's there.
yeah, I'm enjoying it, and it's just we teach a lot. We have like 16 lesson studios, so it's like there's a lot of young people coming to learn about
Oh,
music for
great.
the first time and rent your band instruments. So I think we probably do more business with band and orchestral than we do with guitars. So especially this
Oh,
time of
wow.
year, everyone's rushing in. The band director's like, "Here's your list of things. This is the brand I want you to play. Go rent it." So
Hmm.
we're hopping this time of year. So it's
Wow, great.
been kind of fun.
Well, good.
Well,
Congratulations.
thank
It
you.
sounds very worthwhile too.
Yeah, I'm getting a kick out of it, definitely. Um, and I remember you saying that you played sax on the new album. I remember back in the Yes Years documentary, you had talked about how you played clarinet when you were younger, and it's so this is a chance for us to actually hear you play some horns on a record for the first time. Am
Well,
I?
I did. I played saxophone, but it is keyboard.
Oh,
It
okay.
sounds pretty realistic.
Well,
But
there's some really good emulations out there. So yeah. Do you
yeah,
ever get a chance to play a real woodwind? Or
no, not for a long time.
yeah, well,
No.
I did back in high school, and I have a clarinet now, and when I play it, I sound like I'm still in high school.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's been a long time since I played clarinet.
So, the picture in the Yes album where you have the cast on your foot. How did you break your foot?
We had an accident coming back from a gig in the West Country.
Oh,
Um, Chris was driving. I was in the front with him, band in the back, and we were on a freeway that we hadn't seen the sign. It was in driving rain,
oh,
and we
great.
hadn't seen the sign that part of the freeway had closed down. So it had become a 2-lane, and we were overtaking a semi truck, which was taking quite a while, and we met a car head on.
Oh, that's awful. That's awful.
Yeah, yeah. The engine came back into the compartment and got my foot.
Wow.
Fortunately,
So,
um,
in a way, we're lucky there was a yes after that.
yeah, really. Well, we had 2 or 3 of those, and fortunately, we were in a pretty big car, which probably saved us.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
but
just just a
yeah,
matter.
that's the story.
Was there a bit of nodding off occasionally after long drives and long gigs?
Yes, it was always, and it was always Chris. It was it was always Chris driving, and it was always uh, Chris made a mistake, or he nodded off. He
Well,
nodded off on a autobahn in German,
oh wow.
and yeah, and we went off the autobahn, but fortunately hit a water-filled ditch and slowed the car down, so we were okay. And the police came and radioed for an ambulance and said there were 5 girls in a car at the side of the road.
5 long-haired guys.
Yeah, long-haired musicians.
Yeah, it sounds like
5 girls.
y'all
Yeah,
needed. Sounds like y'all needed a lot of coffee at the Blue Boar to stay
really.
awake. Definitely. Can you share a few choice David Bowie memories with us before we wrap it up?
Well, there were a lot of stories. I didn't mention that the song on the album, Fulton Street, the sort of band jam was about Graham Bond, but actually it also has the memory of playing with David's band, because we used to jam, and we kind of jammed really on the show, the stage show, for like 15 minutes before David came on stage, and they were New York session guys, Dennis Davis and George Murray, Carlos Alomar, just real New York session dudes, really great musicians, and we used to jam. I used to jam on Hammond with them, and we used to do what was that song? Stay?
Yeah, real funky
yeah,
one. Yeah.
that was, I think, the opening song. We played for like 15 minutes, driving the audience bananas,
Right.
before he came out. So that was sort of that was another reminiscence of that I did on this album. But yeah, I mean, there's 100 stories, but they were just fantastic.
Oh.
Totally gracious to me, because I was a little bit out of my depth, I guess, in a way, because of who they were. But the band was very good. I mean, if you listen to the live album.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
It was a great band.
Yeah, really red hot, and it's great that the album is there to remind us of that.
Yeah, the Station to Station was great. But I mean, David, what can you say about David? Well, I mean, just a true gentleman.
And a true artist, I mean, he's just uncompromising.
Yeah, I mean, I traveled with him occasionally, and of course he had a portable library delivered to his hotel suite, and traveled in a limousine with a recording studio and painting equipment. I mean, he was a true artist.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic guy, generous, nice, and the band the same,
Yeah, fantastic, and I wish I could have been there to see you all live, but I was like in kindergarten or somewhere around there, a little too young. So
yeah, that was 76, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Then I probably was a little older than that, probably in third grade or so. But still a little young for a rock concert. But wishful thinking.
That was a great tour. The Station to Station tour was a fantastic show.
That's one of my favorite Bowie albums. I just
love
it.
Yeah, mine too.
Just a great one. A quick question about playing at the Albert Hall with Cream. Any memories you could share of that one? Did that feel like a stressful gig at the time, or just a big break?
No, I mean, more memories of the Janis Joplin show at the Albert Hall, but not so much of the. Of course, it was Cream farewell.
Yeah, last the show. Yeah.
So it was sort of special, and a lot of people were there. I think we were a little bit mismatched in what we were doing. It was early days in the Yes evolution, and they were pretty badass, Cream.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
As was Janis's band, and as was Janis, of course.
Sure.
But it certainly propelled the band to to a little bit more notoriety. That's for sure.
What were some of your favorite Yes songs to play live?
Oh. I guess the ones that are still being played.
Right. Yours is no
Can they
disgrace.
get away? Can they get away from yours? Yours is no disgrace. I've seen all good people and Starship Trooper.
Yeah. How about of the earlier stuff?
But the early stuff, no experience necessary. Which of course we did on the 50th anniversary, which was great to play again. Uh, Something's coming. All those early remakes of other people's songs.
Oh yeah, I love the version of America. Am I right?
America, of
Am I
course, yeah.
writing? Was that basically something that came along once Steve Howe arrived? Because it seems like a tour de force for him guitar wise. And was it was there a version with Peter that was maybe totally different?
Yes, that was before Steve. That was the original band.
Oh, wow, I'd be really curious to hear a version of that. I don't think I've ever seen one surface.
Uh, I think I had to let my cat in. He was scratching. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Mine's been known to
No,
interrupt a
I,
few
no,
interviews.
I'm apologizing to the cat.
Oh.
He's like, well, what are you doing? You locked me out of the studio. Yeah, no, they were, before we really played any original material. That's what we played. Um, Beatles
Well,
songs.
oh yeah, well I love the way you all put it through the Yes blender.
Uh,
You really,
every little thing.
yeah,
So,
you all had a way of,
Simon and Garfunkel.
yeah, you all had a way of really making them your own, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we played. I mean, that's what we played at the Albert Hall. That's what we played on the road. We didn't really have anything else.
Well, looking back on those now, I love them. One of my favorites is "Every Days," the Stephen Stills tune.
That's right. Every day. That's another one.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
kind of
Those
had
are,
went from a really nice kind of languid verse to the bop baba didn't dooby doo bobby doo, and then it
all
just
right.
takes off.
Yeah.
Some of Bill's greatest early drumming, I think, is on that song.
Yeah, I actually saw that on YouTube the other day. The, that was one of the videos of
Y-
that trilogy of videos that we did
y-
in Holland,
Yeah,
where
what
we
what?
where we where we were on the boat.
Yeah, it's almost like
On
you
the
guys were the monkeys or something for
it
it.
was it's like we were,
But that's
yeah,
precious.
chasing with nuns chasing us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't know what's up with that, but that's some precious footage. I mean, just wonderful.
But I think that's the one where I was at the end on the ocean. I was playing bass, and Chris was playing keyboards.
Yeah, you
I think
guys were
was that
mixing it
every
up.
bass? I think it was.
And then it shows you all driving around in the dune buggy. Did that
And the
belong to
Dune Buggies,
who
yeah.
did that belong to?
Oh, it was just rented. The
Just
film
rented? Okay.
company. The film company.
Yeah,
I
because
mean, you have to remember, no one really knew about band videos back then. I think the Monkees was about as far as it had gone, or
yeah,
maybe early Beatles.
yeah, help and all that.
Help, yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, for most bands, no, it didn't exist. So yeah, it was pretty new.
Yeah. Well, it's just great to see that all these years later.
But I hadn't seen them in a long time, and it was fun to see them on YouTube.
Oh yeah, and did some of that early Beat Club footage. You remember doing some of those?
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time, but that's pretty. You could really see what the band was about at that time, and the exuberance of Peter, and
Yeah, there's just a raw energy that's wonderful, and
yeah, there was a lot of energy between Peter and I. It was a little sad what happened to Peter.
yeah, This is true.
Yeah,
But
because he was great. He
oh,
was.
he was absolutely fantastic. I mean, when Steve took his place, it wasn't really that radical of a change compared to when Trevor came along. You know, the differences. It seemed like Steve and Peter had some similarities. Their kind of love of the volume pedal comes to mind immediately,
Yeah, right.
and the
Yeah.
kind of jazzy underpinning of a lot
Yeah,
of
Steve
things.
has said that he was actually quite influenced by Peter, which was nice to hear, really.
Yeah, well, Peter just played great stuff.
Because I mean, I think the story's been told in different ways, but I was really the first one to find Steve playing a gig in the Speakeasy in a band called Bodast.
Sure.
And he was, not playing like the Steve of later days, Steve of yes, he was rocking out.
Yeah.
And but I remember thinking, if Peter had to go, that Steve would be a great replacement. And I actually relayed that story to Steve a couple of years ago, because there have been different stories about how Steve was discovered, how he came to be in the band. But actually, I saw him and recommended him to Chris.
Well, good choice.
Good choice.
Yeah,
right.
you know talent
Although
when you
at the
see
time it probably wasn't. But
right, it kind of shook things up, I'm sure. But that's great. Well, before we wrap it up, I was wondering if there's anything you'd like to share with our audience.
well, nothing except it's been great talking with you, and I hope they enjoy it, and I hope they go out and buy End of Innocence. I think a lot of people who appreciate Yes will actually like the emotion that is in the music that portrays that horrible day.
Agreed. Well, I think it's a really impressive piece of work, and I think every Yes fan should investigate it because I think they will find a lot to enjoy musically.
You tell them, Sean.
Yeah, that's right. Go out and get this, folks.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cherry. You can just tell them to go out.
Cherry Red Records, and it's coming out again September what?
September 10th.
That's right. The day before.
It may be available. Well, I think it's available to pre-order now. Cherry Red, and yes, we'll be out. We've got a couple of videos that are going to be put out there too. So yes, everyone, look out for it. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm excited for the release date and to hear everybody's feedback once they get a chance to digest it and enjoy it.
Yes, it'll be interesting. Of course, there's nothing really light about it.
No, definitely not. But
because of the subject, and it'll be interesting to hear what people think about it.
Well, I mean, it's serious subject, but I feel like once you listen to it, it has kind of a leaves you with a positive feeling, like there is some hope despite the tragedy.
I tried to put that feeling into the resolve, and because we all need to have that.
Absolutely, because I mean, things did change that day dramatically, but life is what you make it, as Billy once said in Circa, and there's been a lot of great memories since then.
Also, it was great that we got Gary Sinise and his organization involved with donating 10% of the album. So for you people that buy it, 10% will go to the military and first responders that Gary Sinise puts together with his organization. So that's very worthwhile.
That's great. Yeah, that's good to know. Excellent.
Yes, a big Yes fan, by the way.
Well, he's got great taste.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend who actually plays in his band. It's called the Colonel Dan Band.
That's right. Yes, he was telling me about that, and he was telling me when he was at school, he used to listen to Yours Is No Disgrace and I've Seen All Good People incessantly.
So did I. Like totally in the mid '80s. I remember just cranking it up.
Yeah, that's what he said.
After hours.
Couldn't get enough of it, he said.
I never get tired of Yours Is No Disgrace. I've got to say, there's just, it's such an interesting arrangement. And it has this kind of propulsive quality that just keeps you moving forward.
That's why it's still being played. That's why those 3-4 songs at the end of the show are still there.
Yeah, well, that was just the Yes album was just kind of it was well named because it was like that's just a classic batch of songs that are.
Yeah, they asked me whether that was okay for me to play on it on the show. My response was, as long as it's not "Don't Have a Lonely Heart," I'm with you.
I hear you. Right? Yeah. Well, that last portion was very special, and I gotta say, I always thought you were the sharpest dresser in Yes, and that continued even to that tour. So
the what? Sorry,
I thought you were the sharpest dresser in Yes. You always had a sense of style, and I appreciate that.
You obviously haven't watched 9012 Live very carefully.
Well, time changes everything. Definitely.
But you could say that about, I think, everyone in the band at that time.
Absolutely. It's just like looking at old photographs. It's like, how could I have done more than that?
Yeah, really.
But at the time, it was pretty hip.
I know. It's a shame, really, because it was actually a very good concert, but I can't watch it because of
well,
what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and even now it seems kind of cutting edge. All the computer graphics and stuff. Now we take that stuff for granted, but in 1984 that was futuristic.
Yeah, right.
So you guys were kind of on the leading edge of that as well, I think. So. Well, Tony, all my best to you.
Thank you, Sean.
And give your wife my best
pleasure,
as well, and the cat.
Pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, what's next for you?
You mean other than leaving the house?
I don't know. Just in general, what have you got cooking?
Actually, I'm so glad that we're here. We're not as restricted as a lot of places, and I get to go out a lot. It's a beautiful place here. We're out on the water. It's gorgeous, and I get to play tennis.
I was going to ask, if you still got plenty of time to squeeze in.
I get to play tennis, which is my love. So I still do that, and it's great.
Yeah, well,
enjoying life.
It'll keep you young. The tennis and music.
I hope so.
Well, all my best to you. Thank you for the years of wonderful music. You've been a big inspiration, and it was a real treat to catch up with you and chat about your wonderful career.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Well, take care. Take care, Tony. All righty then. Have a good night.
Okay.
All right, bye.